Welcome to Engaging Readers with the Power of Podcast. My name is Michelle Haken, and I'm so excited that you are joining me today and are part of the Joyful Reading Summit, where we are collecting gems of and short bursts of professional development to enhance our teaching and support our students as literacy learners. So I am speaking to you today from a suburb of New York City. I'm based in Stamford, Connecticut, but I teach in Westchester, New York, which is about 35 minutes outside of New York City. I've been teaching middle school English for more than 25 years, and I have also penned a handful of books that focus on literacy. So join me for the next 20 minutes, and we're going to talk about how podcasts can really build our students' reading and literacy skills. So think about your favorite podcasts. What do you enjoy about them? I consider myself a podcast junkie because I am constantly listening to podcasts. I was a huge Tim Ferriss fan for quite a while. I've loved his informative podcasts, and then I sort of got involved and started foraying in true crime and the serial podcast. And now I listen to everything from educational podcasts to podcasts that are specific to like breaking down your favorite HBO show. But what about you? What do you like? Because we can use that energy and excitement of what you enjoy about your favorite podcast and bring that into our classroom for our students. I had actually stumbled across a true crime podcast that was specifically for young adults that worked so well in my murder mystery reading and writing unit that I brought it in as a specific mentor text that we would read for the entire month. What you're looking at now are just some pages and books out of my murder mystery true crime reading and writing guide. This is something that I share with my students at the beginning of every unit. They have a specific guide that is a digital guide that sort of supports their learning as well as talks about their success criteria and our learning intentions for that unit. For those of you that have received the VIP bundle, you are getting my whole murder mystery and true crime reading and writing guide for you to adapt and utilize with your students. But like with any reading and writing unit, I am using a handful of mentor texts throughout the unit to share and showcase with my students and give them the tools and techniques that we can look at closely in order, in this case, to write a detailed original mystery. And here are a few of the books that are really popular among my students that we've been utilizing. But when I came across the Lethal Lit, a Tig Torres mystery podcast, it's part serial and cold case. It's got lots of Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes reference in it, as well as it has that teen drama feel that Riverdale brings in. I was hooked in and really hooked my students into the podcast to help us understand the elements of mystery. So as I said, we were listening to an episode or two each week. Students were taking their detective notes, and I've shared the detective notes with all of you who are part of the Reading Summit. So you can, again, utilize them and adapt them for your students. So we can really understand the elements that make a mystery suspenseful and intriguing and attractive. But the one thing that I'll say that I do is that we listen to the first episode together in class to discuss it as a mentor text before I then send students off to be participating and listening in them weekly. So, when we talk about podcasting, we have that listening element, the connecting element, and by me teaching and utilizing and showcasing the podcast as a mentor text together with a whole class, we are connecting together and really helping to discuss and analyze and break down the elements before we get to, and we can talk about towards the end, how we can create podcasts with our students. But going back to the why, if we think specifically about the International Society for Technology in Education, their standards for students, if we look at our literacy standards, all of them call for students to clearly express themselves in a variety of formats and platforms. So we're not just writing anymore. Our creative communication is coming through digitally as well as in print, verbally, artistically. So when students are creating their own podcasts, they are the knowledge constructors. They are empowered learners. And these are 21st century digital skills that we want our students to have upon leaving our class as well as upon graduation. So when we listen to podcasts in our class, students are building background knowledge. They're learning about history, science, current events, creative fiction, and so much more. They're able to understand big ideas before reading about them, and they can make smarter predictions and connections when reading. It also boosts vocabulary because they're listening to language techniques. They are hearing new words in conversation. They are seeing and listening to models of strong language and sentence structure, which is all going to really help with their writing as well as their listening comprehension. Because listening helps you become a better reader. You're able to follow the story along or the argument from the beginning to the end. Students can pick out the main ideas and important details. They can practice summarizing and retelling what they have heard and hear how ideas are explained clearly to learn their own sentence patterns and transitions. So one thing that I do is scaffold our listening comprehension, especially in the beginning of the year when we're introducing a podcast as a mentor text, or as well as just building that background knowledge. So I might be utilizing a podcast Google form, which students are responding to specific elements of the podcast, or I might have a graphic organizer where they have to pull out and summarize, ask questions. They are looking at the elements and transitions. Depending on what we're utilizing and listening the podcast for, I might showcase that organizer or their note catcher in different ways. And for participating in the reading summit, you get 2 or 3 different graphic organizers and podcast note catchers to adapt and utilize with your students. But as I said, when I talked about my own podcast listening, podcasts come in different formats and genres. And depending on what you are teaching in your class or how you want to showcase a podcast, you might want more of that fictional element. We have the really popular The Unexplained Mars Patel, as well as The Lethal Lit I talked about, or Limetown. We have our narrative nonfiction, bringing in that creative storytelling, but grounded in truth and as well as nonfiction. Radio Lab, if you break it down, it's really a 5-paragraph informative essay. This American Life is great. You Missed in History class has great information from a history perspective, or maybe you want more of that view conversational style, which is more of like the John Green, Hank Green's Dear Hank and John, or the Tim Ferriss that I talked about. There's also kid specific ones like Teenager Therapy and Brains On. But there's so many. I'm just highlighting a small amount here today in the short time we have together. So if you are interested in not only like integrating podcasts as a listening tool, but also a creative tool, you really need to determine that genre and style that you're looking for, as well as consider your grade level and the content that you or unit that you want your students to be working in. So what particular curriculum unit can you think about in the upcoming year? Can you enhance with a podcast project, both with listening and creating? What might be the topic or topics? And do you want students to inform, persuade, or entertain? Are students going to work in pairs or independently? And again, also think about that minimum and maximum time. Even 3 minutes is a long time to really help our students talk about and extend on an idea. We need to provide models and mentors for our students throughout the unit if we are going to ask them to create podcasts. And again, Lethal Lit is my model mentor text for our mystery unit. But if you want students creating their own, like more nonfiction ones, check out the National Public Radio Student Podcast Challenge every year. There are some beautiful personal essays that students have put to podcasts that are definitely key to helping us understand more and build connections, as well as, supporting that listening comprehension. 6 Minutes is another mystery podcast that you can check out, but there's tons of note catchers to help provide and capture those key ideas that students see in those models and mentors. So students might do a podcast about book versus the movie, or their own Radio Lab style informative inquiry. You can have students create a suspenseful podcast like Lethal Lit. In our mystery writing unit, students can create a podcast or they can write a story. That's really up to you. There are beautiful personal narratives and memoirs that are great for podcasting and storytelling, or you can even bring in poetry or different stories and interviews with families. I love the breakdown of the Marvel videos on YouTube. That can be turned into a podcast or an investigative report. So there are tons and tons of ideas, and you can build podcasts in throughout the entire school year. Just like I give my students a note catcher or a graphic organizer to capture the key ideas when they're listening, when we're writing about podcasts or producing a podcast, I will give them an organizer to outline, plan, and draft. Nobody goes into a podcast completely impromptu. Even in this video, I have my notes here to keep looking back to. But writing an outline or a draft means revising, making sure our words and word choice communicate our central message. Again, this is enhancing vocabulary acquisition. It is supporting syntax and grammar development. We talk very differently from the way that we write. So are students able to talk and write differently based on the audience and the purpose of our work? For podcasting tools and equipment, you do not need fancy mics or headphones. All of our Chromebooks, computers, tablets have a camera and microphone for us to enable. If you want a microphone and stand, that's definitely helpful, but headphones are really not required. You want to just make sure that students are recording in a quiet space so you're not picking up background information. And when it comes to podcasting platforms and apps, because I work in New York, we have a very strict 2D law and compliance. So I need to make sure that any of the tech that I use with my students is 2D compliant. You need to check with your acceptable use policy when utilizing podcasts and preview everything for your students. But Screencastify is a great tool that our school uses. It's a Chrome extension. It's on all of our school Chromebooks so that students can audio record, video record. Soundtrap is great. They have an EDU version, but it is a paid subscription. So depending on the budget of your school, Soundtrap is something that has lots of bells and whistles, but you will have to pay for that. WeVideo is also, I put a star next to all of the D2 compliant technology that I'm sharing. But WeVideo is also great for recording. If you are a Mac school, you can use GarageBand, and Audacity is a free downloadable recording and editing program that I've used for more than 20 years, where you can create audio files and share them as MP4s. So going back to that original overlapping Venn diagram with our listening, with our connections, and creating, when we bring in podcasts into the classroom, we are making connections. We are helping students work together. We welcome diversity and commonality of perspectives. We are practicing empathy, building our communication skills. Students are becoming thoughtful and curious media consumers. We're sharing and receiving new ideas. It really encourages discussion and metacognition. When we're talking about what we hear or read or thinking about elements of building a podcast, it's going to deepen our comprehension. And when we discuss the episodes, we're practicing that summarizing, questioning, making connections, those core strategies for deeper literacy engagement. So some key takeaways, podcasts do help students become stronger readers and thinkers. We're building background knowledge by listening, boosting vocabulary. We're hearing great models of strong language to improve our own writing and speaking. We're utilizing note catchers and graphic organizers to guide students' listening comprehension. And, literacy today is more than print reading. It is multimodal. That means it includes audio, visual, digital literacy. They introduce students to new formats for consuming information, helping them build skills for navigating and analyzing multimodal text. These are critical 20th century skills. Bonus, it's motivation, it's accessibility, it is empowering for our struggling readers, for our English language learners, and our students with learning differences. When we use podcasts thoughtfully, pairing them with transcripts, discussion guides, graphic organizers, extension activities, we can make them a powerful complement to traditional literacy instruction and a research-aligned tool that builds comprehension, vocabulary, critical thinking, and background knowledge. So I'm hoping that I've inspired you today to think and connect with all different podcasts and think about where they might fit in your classroom. Feel free to connect with me on my email, through my blog, on socials. I am always sharing new ideas and materials on my blog, in addition to those of you who are walking away with tons of resources to utilize in the classroom. Participating in the Reading Summit. So I am so glad that you joined me today. I wish you the best safe summer, and I look forward to connecting.